Hello and welcome to a 30-minute flow to work towards Hanumanasana. That's our full splits. And of course, full is variable depending on where you're at. I want to kind of remind you that this is, I think, a great example of a pose that's a big pose. But, I've been working towards this pose for 20 years-ish. And, I'm certainly more further along than I was 20 years ago. But I'm also, the pose doesn't look perfect or look kind of complete. And I'm okay with that because what I'm really looking for is expanding space in the hips and mobility in the hips, which is so valuable. And we're tying this pose in with creativity and, releasing some of that kind of deep energy in our body that relates to the reproductive, the hips, the sacral area. This is second chakra work that can help spur up your kundalini energy, your kind of Shakti energy. And that's what we're looking for here. This class is actually going to be pretty linear because of the time constraint and that we're working directly towards a pose. But you may feel more spacious and a little bit more creative, those juices flowing once you get off the mat. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the thighs and hips, really the thighs. We have to be very clear about our boundaries, which I also think is really interesting in that space of the sacrum. And so we have to be really clear about our boundaries in terms of pushing too far. Our hamstrings are naturally tight. That actually is a good thing to kind of hold us up in the way we need to. So we're not trying to push through that tightness. We're just kind of, the term I've used for years is kind of like knocking on the door. We want to kind of like knock on the door and then open it up a little, give some space, open it up a little more. And so in 30 minutes, we may not have the ability to warm the body up as we would in a vinyasa class. We're certainly going to try to really focus on that area. And so we're going to see how it goes. And hopefully whether you can kind of feel more spacious in this pose today, or you can use some of the tips when we're working on the pose itself down the line in your vinyasa classes or in your own practice time. So we're going to start in downward facing dog. So I want you to just dive in, get arranged as needed, and dive into your downward dog. So kind of find the normal downward dog that you take. And then I want you to be really clear. I am so sorry. I did not mention we would like 2 blocks and a blanket with this class. They're sitting right here. The blanket could be anything soft, like that could slide, and the blocks could be anything that are equal. Excuse me. So pedaling out the legs. And I really want you to kind of pedal, and feel into the back of those legs. Try not to swish the hips here too much because we're going to really focus back of legs. And then drop the left heel. If available, take your right toes and kind of push down on that left heel. See how that changes the whole body. Notice your left knee should still be a little bent. And then right foot, other side. Left toes on the back of right heel. Just as an aid. Push down. Keep the right knee a little bent. And go ahead. Downward dog. Inhale, right leg high. Exhale, step the foot through, drop the left knee. So because I've got the blocks, I'm going to use them throughout the entire class. And again, I think that's going to help with that idea of knocking on the door, of kind of opening things up slowly. If you don't have blocks that really work for that, that's okay. You can bring your hands down. We're going to drop into the hips and kind of open and pull back. Straight-ish right leg. Inhale, sink in and open. And exhale. So as I mentioned, this is a little bit more of a linear class, but there are going to be moments of flow. And that flow, especially around the area of the hips, is what can help awaken some of your creative energy, your personal identity, kind of the imprint of who you are that's unaffected by all the labels that other people put on you. Let's do 2 more of these. Good. Next time you inhale, bend your right knee. Lift your left, and then just go ahead and step forward, stretch your spine, and lower. Let your head hang. Inhale, rise up. Exhale, stand. So we're going to go slow this first cycle. We do need to start building heat. That's important for getting into those thighs. Inhale, lift your heart. Exhale, dive down, hands land on blocks. Right leg steps back, right knee down. And then we're going into that same cycle. So again, super fluid, take the rules away, sink in, inhale. Exhale, back it up. Continue. And so one of the things I mean about kind of taking the rules away is it feels good to me to kind of swish my hips to the right when I sink in. Later on, I'll talk about really keeping the hips squared. But right now, we're feeling into where things are at. Couple more. Good. The next time you bend your left knee, move your blocks away, lift right knee. Inhale, step back plank, and exhale, lower to belly. We are going to take a moment in Sphinx pose. I want your elbows parallel, your heart open, and your head back. And we want this pose because we also need to stretch the front of the hips and the groin to get into Hanumanasana. So in Sphinx, you should be pushing your head back just enough that you can feel your low belly stretching. On an exhale, drop your hands, move through knees, downward dog. This time in downward dog, go ahead and pedal with the hip stretch. So before we kind of were skipping that part, now I want you to kind of wiggle the hips all the way up to the rib cage. And then come into downward dog. Inhale, left leg high. Exhale, left foot through to hands. You're going to drop your right heel and rise up warrior one. So first, just get into warrior one. Heel toe your left foot a little to the left. Ground that right heel. And once again, you should feel that back line of the right leg kind of lighting up as you push your right heel to the mat. So we'll just do a couple heat building fist pulls. Take an inhale, exhale, left leg straightens, elbows back. Inhale, reach it up. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Couple more. Good. Inhale into that warrior one. Exhale, dive forward, straighten left leg again. Grab those blocks. And come on down into your pyramid pose. Land here. Push right heel down. Lengthen spine. And breathe. Bend left knee, step forward, inhale, halfway lift, and exhale, fold. Inhale, rise arms to sky, and exhale, stand, mountain pose. Inhale, reach up. Exhale, fold. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, left leg back. Drop that left heel right away. Rise up, warrior one. Heel toe your right foot to the right. And bend your right knee. So now you should feel that connection on your left leg through the calf, thigh, and kind of rotate the hips forward. Reach your arms up, stretch. Good. We're going to add on just by pulling those fists back. Take an inhale. Exhale, straighten, pull back. So we're just going to want to create a little flow. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. There's also some interesting kind of connection to that left leg. As you move in the right, what happens in the back of the leg? Ha. Maybe a small HA sound. Again, this type of work also clears out, stirs up stagnant energy, freeing up that creativity. Inhale. Ha. Ha. One more. Ha. Good. Inhale into your warrior one. And then on an exhale, dive over right leg, straighten the leg, adjust your hips as needed. And again, just because I'm planning to use them the entire class, maybe use your blocks. And I do think it's interesting if you're someone who kind of does a lot of yoga and has a relationship to each pose. What happens in one pose with blocks and then that same pose without? I actually feel a deeper stretch than if I was kind of diving in here. Not really sure why. Take a couple more breaths. Start to soften. On an inhale, bend your right knee. Exhale, step back plank. Inhale, plank. Exhale, belly. Inhale, cobra this time. Exhale down. Couple more like that. Fluid cobras. Same thing. We want to stretch all the way down to our belly button and beyond. Couple more. Good, and then move back into downward dog. This time just a regular dog. You can always bend your knees, but try to drop those heels. Feel some more length. Continue along the back of the legs. Inhale, right leg high. Exhale, right foot outside of hands. Drop the left knee, and again, if you're using blocks, go ahead and bring them inside. So we're going to do 2 cycles here. One is going to be stepping forward and back, and then we'll kind of pause, rest, a quick child's pose, and then return for jumping, optional, of course. So you've got that back knee lifted now. Sink those hips and just kind of feel into the spine. And then right leg back, left foot forward, sink. Left, right, sink. And I'm really more just adding that sinking in to increase some mobility. You don't have to do it, but I'm going to do it on this cycle to really help open up the hips and the hamstrings. So keep going here. You'll notice if you've done kind of a similar movement with me before, you'll notice that those blocks really help give some space and I think some longevity. Let's do one more cycle. Good, and then the next time you both feet step back, drop the knees, come into child's pose. If you want to, you can use the blocks here. I do want a wider hipped child's pose here so that you can sink into the space of the hips. And the hips are so dynamic. There's not one way to quote unquote stretch the hips. I always ask when students say, hey, I'd love to do some hip opening. I always ask, like, what kind? Because we've got such a range of motion, and that's really their whole job, right? Their job is to allow your legs to move in every direction they need to, and your hips, your trunk to kind of twist and turn on the top side. Take 2 more breaths. We're going right into that same movement, just as we did, or we add the hop. So come on up. You can just return now that we know where we're putting those blocks, just kind of put them back. And actually, I'm going to do mine flat because I'm going to do the hop and I want to make sure I feel really stable. And then set up in your downward dog. Hands just kind of frame those blocks. Inhale, left leg high. Exhale, step left foot outside. Set your blocks up so they're truly inside of your left foot. And so the way we're going to do this, and actually less about the way, more about the why. We're going to do this because, as I mentioned in the beginning, we don't have long in this class to warm up these legs. And so if your body feels up to it, I suggest the jump simply out of kind of necessity for warmth. If your body does not feel up for it, then it's never worth pushing through. There's also the creative aspect of freeing up that stagnant, stale energy to kind of unleash your creative spirit, your life force, your energy. So left foot on the floor, right knee lifts. And so let's just do one step. Left foot back, right foot forward, right foot back, left foot forward. So again, that's your flow. Maybe release the pulse that we were doing on the other side. Or jump switch, jump switch, jump switch, jump switch. Keep going, couple more. Again, if you're someone who's done this without blocks, what a difference, right? Let's do 3 more full. So that means each side 3 times. One more. Step back. Child's. Keep those blocks for your arms. And return to your breath. And feel the heat. All of a sudden, my muscles in my legs are wide awake, ready to go. Obviously, that heat transfers throughout the body. So just kind of feel into it. I'm moving my legs a little closer together just to feel that. Take 2 more breaths. Great. Go ahead and set your blocks nearby. We are starting to move towards the workshop section of our class. We are going to do, just for planning purposes, we're going to do 1 round of Hanumanasana splits here, just, as is with a block. A second round optional, if you have the space, not everyone does, at a wall. And then a third round back here with the blanket. So that's just what to prepare for. So let's start in downward dog. Inhale, right leg high. Exhale, send right foot through, left knee down. And then bring those blocks alongside of your right leg. Lift your right toes and slide right toes forward. So I want to kind of start in this pretty spacious for most people pose. We're not leaning in yet. Right toes are lifted. Ardha Hanumanasana. And then kind of keep your chest lifted. And then walk your hands forward on the blocks or just on the ground. And start to dive in with as long of a spine as possible. I want you to feel the back of that right thigh. See what you can do to soften, just internally. Lift up, and this time I do want you to slide your right heel forward, kind of like, not your furthest place, but kind of like you're getting there. Now again, lean in and fold. Just feel what changed there. You're obviously not going to want to lean quite as far. That's where the blocks come in. They almost create a boundary. And I should say that if you ever get to a point where it feels like that stretch feels too far, it is. There's no kind of question mark around it. You need to back up and really figure out where you can re-engage to proceed. Most of us, take 1 more breath. Pull your right leg back. Most of us have such a natural restriction in the hamstrings, even very flexible people, that we don't often overstretch too far in Hanumanasana splits. But there are a few folks who that really may apply to in this pose. In downward dog, take a moment to assess and feel the difference on each side. Inhale, left leg high. Exhale, send foot through to hands, right knee down. Same thing, come up on those blocks. And we're again just kind of going to come into this Ardha Hanuman, this half splits. Sometimes people call it runner stretch. And I do want you to kind of walk in a little bit. Keep the leg where it is, but just walk your trunk forward so you can really feel the relationship, that internal boundary that most of our bodies put up against the depth in this pose. And again, there's probably a reason. So that's why we don't want to blast the door open. We just want to knock and just kind of peek inside. Take another deep breath. Stay like this, or start to walk your left foot forward. You can kind of cross the line towards what would be a Hanuman, a full split, but it doesn't have to be your most expansive place. And then again, fold. I'm going to reach my hands more forward. That's going to feel better for me folding, but that doesn't mean for everybody. Two more breaths this time. Notice if your toes want to turn away from center, meaning they want to kind of roll open or in. And then come back. And then bend your left knee and just take a moment and reset. So we are going to take this to the wall. Option, if you're not at the wall, would be standing split on your mat. It's really the same thing. We're essentially doing standing split at the wall. And if you have the blocks, you can do standing split. I'll just show very quickly. You can do standing split here, and I recommend the 2 blocks. If you're doing it at the wall, we're going to walk up the wall. So unlike a kind of a handstand, sometimes we do that at the wall, we don't need to measure as much. We just kind of want to stand maybe a foot distance away with our heels. And then I'm going to walk my hands a little more forward because I do want to give myself access while keeping it tight. So I'm going to bring my right leg up first. Why I think this is a good place to be. It just changes perspective. Your toes should be tucked into the wall. It helps identify your hips and where is square and where is not. If your right knee starts to kind of roll open, that would be less square. We won't be here too long. Take one more breath. And then step it down. And then just kind of, I'm going to just like lean my butt towards the wall, kind of stretch the low back that way. So it's interesting because you would think, well, we're at the floor and versus the wall. Why is one keeping my foot more or less square? And the reason is your standing leg, your standing foot. When you're on the floor, that foot has more room to move, which allows the hips to move. So go ahead and do the same thing. Kind of lean your weight forward into those blocks. If you need to step your foot forward, do. But if you can stay in the tight space, do. And then lift that leg up. Toes tucked into the wall. I've got a light switch right there, so I am going to kind of hop forward a little bit. So that right foot has kind of this integrity that it doesn't have as much of in the floor pose. 2 more breaths. Good. Soften and step down. Same thing, kind of find a place where you can drop your seat to the wall and stretch. I'm going to take a quick interlude here for an IT stretch, as I feel kind of some compression in that right hip. Compression's not bad, but I just want to, kind of do that before we move and repeat the pose. So right ankle behind left, hands on blocks, fold. Breathe. Other side. Left ankle behind right. I just step my right foot in front. Drop in. Good, and then return. Come into a downward dog. Actually, before you do, set your blanket, towel, sweatshirt, whatever, at the front of your mat on, this is ideal if you're on a wood surface or a tile, but it's okay even on a carpet, just something that kind of gives some soft, it actually decreases the resistance of your heel. And then press into your downward dog. And once again, just a linear downward dog, slightly bent knees, but see what it feels like to drop your heels a little closer. And then reach your right leg up, inhale. Exhale, send it through, drop left knee. So go ahead and come into your original pose that we had started with, kind of pulling your hips back, straight leg. And then we're going to just kind of skip ahead and bring your right heel onto the blanket. So if you don't feel like that was the right setup, meaning the right distance, go ahead and bring it back, rearrange, and return. And so I've got my blocks on the highest level now because what I want to be able to stay upright. And I've also got my left toes tucked under, which I didn't cue last time. That is going to keep your left knee pointed down, some of that integrity I was talking about. And then start to slide right heel forward. Keep your chest lifted as you do that. Again, if you come into a place where it's like, that is too far, that is your red light signal to back up immediately. And the cool thing about having, especially if you're on a wood floor or a tile floor, the blanket is that you can come out and in, and you can ease in and then ease out, which I really like that ability. Sometimes we kind of wiggle ourselves into a pose and it's hard to get out. So if you're playing around like I am, kind of seeing your depth and where it works and maybe playing with the heights of the blocks, go ahead. And then I do want you to find that place that's where you're going to work today. And I want you to take 3 breaths there. Toes straight up. If it feels too loose, you pull your pelvic floor, your inner thigh muscles together. Good, and then pull it back. And this time we're just going to rest kind of kneeling. We will go into downward dog, but I just want, to kind of let things return with no stretching. Downward dog. Feel the difference, right and left. And left foot forward. And drop right knee. Bring blocks along. So again, you're going to straighten that left leg, toes up. Keep the right toes tucked. That's important. Kind of walk your hands forward. Use high, medium, low block, whatever works. But we do want support on both sides. I should have said that. And then you want your left foot onto the heel, onto the blanket. And we can kind of just start there. And then I'm going to, once again, kind of play around with sliding in and sliding out. A couple times, see how that feels. It's not only seeing how it feels, it's allowing for change without blasting into it. I have some variation in my hips on the sides of my body, around my thighs and low back. And so I feel this in very different places on each side, like I do most hip poses. And that's not a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with me that's the case. That's just how it is. Slide the left foot forward when you're ready. Kind of find the place where you're still integral. You're not flying out. You're not creating too much flexibility, but it is a stretch. 3 breaths. Good, return. Again, kneel, just so we have a moment without stretching. Because even downward dog is stretching. I know we forget that sometimes because we do it so often. Come back, downward dog. And this is really, it's not our last pose, but it's close. And so I want you to just feel the change. I did not do movement before this class today. So I was probably just as tight as everyone else. I had to work this morning, sitting. And I feel space around my low back, my hips, my backs of legs. And I think that's just a really great reminder to the power of movement and the power of attention to our body. Take one more breath. Go ahead and drop down. We're going to just close this class in a Baddha Konasana, soles of feet together. So this is a different pose. It's a different hip opener. And so you don't have to pull your heels in so far, but I do think it's important. We've done a lot of linear movement with our hips. And so we're going to just close in this soft yet very open space. So just kind of dive in if you want to continue that practice of the blocks. Maybe you even kind of like lean in, bringing your forehead to the blocks if that feels good. We're going to close this class about 5 breaths here, and of course you can always just continue on. As I mentioned, there was a little spurt of fluidity in this class, but I think you might be surprised by the release of energy you might feel afterwards, because we've done deep work in the hips. And as I mentioned, the hips are where that kind of bowl of creativity, that bowl of spinal life force energy lives. Take one more breath. Thank you so much for being here.